How does mindset affect the way we lead our businesses? How does the way we view ourselves and even talk to ourselves impact our ability to build 8-figure plus companies? Listen to this interview that I'm about to have with Paul Jarrett, co-founder and CEO of the Bulu Group. So they're a 3PL company, but they've been through several iterations of their brand and have been venture backed and then have bought that venture capital back from the investors. And then they have continued to scale and grow. But I thought Paul's mindset and the way he approaches work, the way he's grown as a leader, and the way that they have implemented Traction EOS in their system have really made all the difference in the world. You're going to love this interview. Hope you listen to it. Hope you enjoy it. Please subscribe, follow our feeds here. That helps us as we get the Return on Podcast show to continue growing. Hope you enjoy this episode with Paul Jarrett. It's time to maximize profitability and cash flow. It's time to learn habits and hacks from the best e-com CEOs. It's time for Return on Podcast with me, Tyler Jefcoat. I love it. I love it. Guys, welcome to today's episode of Return on Podcast. I'm going to bring in my friend here, Paul Jarrett, CEO of BuluGroup.com. Paul, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, Tyler. How are you doing, man?
Man, life is good. We're kind of wrapping, we're talking, we're loosening it up. It's getting towards the end of the week.
Yeah.
It might be beer 30 pretty soon. I'm not sure.
Let's have some fun, man.
Yeah, I love it. Well, but before we hit play here, we're just talking about how different these like great athletes are. And yes. You live in a town in Lincoln, Nebraska, where there's a lot of great athletes. I live in a town, Athens, Georgia. We got our fair share. And I'll never forget the first time you were talking about shaking hands. The first time I shook Brad Johnson's hand, he was a MVP quarterback for Tampa Bay Bucks a long time ago, lives in my town here. Like it becomes evident that we're not a different species, Paul, but you and I can be pretty big guys and you're a much better athlete than I am. But it isn't, we're not that. That's a different guy. That's a different dude.
Yep. Just built different. Right. And it's interesting how many people have maybe, I would throw myself in the category of like, I had 9 out of the 10 elements. Right. But that explosive power. I just got, because I'd say I didn't have that explosive power, it leads to a lot of injuries, right? Because you're just like working 10 times harder. But yeah, it's you don't know it, and then when you witness and see it, like I was telling you, like shaking Wade Boggs' hands or Dave Remington or hanging out with those guys, like
yes,
they're just different. I mean, everything from watching them eat garbage to like whatever, just they don't sleep, and you're like, there's definitely a different biological thing going on here. So yep. It's wild. And interestingly enough, you see a lot of that in business as well, right? Like some people are just wired differently, So yeah, it's fascinating to see.
I think that's right. I mean, that's actually like a great segue because we're actually going to mostly talk about business, probably, and not football or wrestling or anything else here. But like I think the kind of person, Paul, that whether they would have viewed themselves as an entrepreneur or not, like that starts a business that actually pushes through the hardest shit and makes it and it works. Like it does require a little bit of. It's just a little different, man. And I hate to say it. Sometimes it's like I'll be honest with you. Sometimes it's like trauma. Like you grew up with some trauma, and you're like, I'm just like.
I was going to say that.
I mean, it just is what it is. So like, let me hear a little bit of your story. So you at one point in your life, like had a day job, bro. You were a desk monkey, like a bunch of other people. Yeah. I was one of them. And you decided to like build a company. Like, what went wrong, and why did you go down that path, man? How did it go?
Yeah, well. I grew up in a we call them mobile home parks because trailer parks is a bad word around.
No, yeah, we don't use that phrase around.
Right? But trailer park in Nebraska, we'll just call it right, right next to a sewer plant, right? Yeah. And I would say that I never really understood that, and I want to be respectful to my parents because. I would say like they were dealt a rough hand, right? Like they didn't come from the best, most perfect families, and maybe my mom, right? Like she farmers family or like whatever, but their parents got into businesses, entrepreneurs. They saw some success, some failures, and my dad kind of, probably not really by choice, but was thrown into kind of owning some property that didn't work out, and we kind of ended up in this trailer park. And this was before I was born, and I watched him literally kind of process these trailers where people were getting evicted and these trailers are getting hauled out. And he's like, wait a second, we can actually, I think it's my mom. She was like, we can buy this for $1, redo them, rent them out. And bit by bit, they bought up 80 units and then the land for the trailer park, right? And houses.
Wow.
And the only labor were us 4 kids and maybe some handyman help or some city mission folks that got paid with a bottle of booze or whatever it was, right?
Yep.
And, I think I'm so grateful that we were just ingrained with that hard work. Well, after I think I was about 15, all those investments and the years and years of my parents just busting their asses, it really started to pay off. And we went from the trailer park to a home with an in-ground pool, sauna. Now, given it wasn't a perfect home, we redid the whole thing. But we went from the poor side of town to the rich side of town, right? And one of the things that always kind of put me in 2 different worlds was definitely sports, right? But that shock of seeing in school the people with the haves and the have-nots, right? And honestly, man, I can say this now because we bought out our venture capitalists and our investors and all the folks. It just created a chip on my shoulder for wealthy people, right? And not in a way of pissed off at them, but pissed off at the system, right? And it is the thing. And the interesting thing is who am I to speak? I had the genetic lottery, geographic lottery. I'm a tall white dude in Nebraska. What do I have to complain about? Well, this isn't about me. This is about there's some serious unfair starting lines for people in life. Yeah. And I probably was middle to upper as far as genetics and all that stuff. But it actually really pisses me off for we're a woman-owned company for a reason. My co-founder and wife has 51% of the company because that's how this industry should be. And frankly, the women in logistics on our team just happen to be way more talented at understanding how to execute than men by no decision, just by coincidence. So why wouldn't we do that, right? And so I think that from an early age, and frankly, being, the classic, bullied, being made fun. I remember I had no idea what a brand name was, right?
Right.
Oh, a Nike man. It was just a foreign, and it was really dumb to me in the beginning, but then I of course had to get those Jordans. I had to get those things. And so what did I do? I went to the trailer park, went to the flea markets, went to the dudes I know would sell me knives and explicit lyrics. NWA was always a good seller. I would buy that stuff, go to my rich friends, and they're paying $50 for an NWA CD that somebody gave me for $5, right? And that was kind of the beginning of wait a second, certain groups of people value things other than certain people, other groups. And I think over time, and even what we're doing now as a business, this whole attitude of how do we level the playing field, right? And I was just asked on a sales call that I joined, this guy was like, well, what do you guys stand for? And it's I've always struggled with our brand because I'm actually not that passionate about a product. I'm not super passionate about a service. I'm not passionate about a specific thing. What am I actually passionate about? I'm passionate about teams. I'm passionate about a rising tide raises all boats, right? Yeah. I am passionate about handing 10 people the same axe and letting them decide what to do with it, right? They're going to chop down a tree. They're going to hunt me down and attack me with it. They're going to burn the axe for firewood. They're going to sell it. That's where I really like presenting opportunities to people, not doing things for people. And I think that upbringing, my father was ended up becoming a chief of police, strict Catholic, just all of the classic, Catholic, bullied, all the cliches kind of add up. And you just naturally, even though I'm, 42 and I'm very aware of it, I got to tone that down a little bit, right? But doing what we're doing now as a company and leveling the playing field for brands and saying hey, you're probably getting screwed on logistics and nobody's going to tell you. That's the part that's like the most fulfilling, because nobody did that for us. I think all of those things kind of added up to create what we're doing now. And I don't have a better way of telling people, but I'm like, finally, after acquiring our business, and I'll get into the business in a little bit,
Yeah,
but
sure.
finally, after acquiring the business 100% and going through really what I would say most people don't experience in a career, the highs and lows, right? There's like nothing more than this Zen confidence of like, oh, we know what we have to do. We know how to do it. We know logistics is hard. But there definitely is, like, when you look at entrepreneurs and when you look at successful people, and I am constantly trying to like deconstruct what this is, because I mentor a lot of people and I'm in part of a lot of different groups. And all I can say is, I think there is a level of some sort of trauma, right, that you experience. And why does that come into play, or how does that come into play? I think it just gives them, or people that experience really hard things, like a thicker skin, right? So like nothing that I can experience as a business, as horrible or as long as it goes, doesn't compare to some of the things I went through growing up. I won't get into the details of like being bullied or other things, but like whenever things get hard, I'm like, yeah, but you know what, man? Like I'm not worried about my life. I'm not going to bed hungry. I'm not. It really isn't that bad. And these are actually problems I should be grateful for, because I've seen the other side. I know people that have caught, bad hand of cards, right? So in a way, you can kind of like turn that pain into like, it's just another issue you have to solve. And what I see, and especially the people that I've seen become uber successful, and I've seen a lot of people start a company and drop it, is there's really two key factors. It's that grit that usually comes from some sort of trauma or whatever. But the other thing is like curiosity, right? Like, how does this work? Like, how did we get into logistics? I just couldn't believe like that nobody had a solution for what we were looking for. We spent damn near 12 years looking for the thing. And I'm like, you know what? I think we're going to have to do it. Like we're just going to have to offer it. So yeah.
I think you give us some insight, Paul, there into like, I do think that you describe entrepreneurial DNA really well. Like there's Dan Martell wrote a book called Buy Back Your Time. Pretty good. If you haven't read it, check it out. But it's one of the things he talks about in there that I really resonated with was this idea that some level of childhood trauma is actually really highly correlated with entrepreneurship. I didn't know this. Like, I mean, my mom, who I love very much, was an addict, right? And so like, there's some things that I dealt with growing up where it's like, about some percentage of the population responds to that by kind of naturally clamming up to survive. And some people naturally respond to that by naturally kind of getting pissed off to survive. And there are some ups and downs to being the side of that gets pissed off.
Yeah.
But that same thing, you talk about this, like I'm in business, I'm looking for this solution. Where in the world is this solution? We kind of revert back to that same, kind of DNA or wiring. That's like, wait a minute, this is broken and I'm not happy about it. Let me just build the thing that I want, so that I can get what I want out of life.
Because there's no help coming, right? It's just you. That's right. Like that's a familiar feeling, right?
Yeah, it really is. It's funny. The irony is on the flip side of that, as life has gotten probably a little bit easier. I exited my first company in 2017 and we're building this one up, and my kids are beautiful and my wife is beautiful. And like my life is like categorically easier than it was 35 years ago. Right?
It messes with you, right?
It does. And it's like some of the coping mechanisms that you develop as a 9-year-old, you're like, okay, wait a minute. I might need to like reassess how quickly I like jump into like Marine Corps mode. Do you know what I mean? So it's I'm just curious, like as your team has scaled, you guys have done a lot of cool things. Do you feel like your leadership has had to evolve? Like, I don't know if it's along the same vein that I'm talking about there or in other ways.
I get what you're saying.
It's had to evolve. Yeah. What does that look like?
I think I've done a complete 180 from where I started. Yeah. I think I would have, by the way, Kelsey out there, just to put proof where I'm talking there. Kelsey, ladies hauling around on the forklift behind me. So I'm like, see, there are a lot of women there. Just something you don't see every day, right?
It is totally not. Yeah.
I need to
That's my background, Paul, to have like people back there on spreadsheets, like
Yeah,
doing accounting, fixing like if you guys are listening to this on one of the podcast players, like Paul literally has his actual warehouse, 3PL facility behind him.
120,000 square feet behind me.
That's a lot of square feet, Paul.
Yeah,
So sorry, cut you off, man. Like you were talking about leadership and
yeah. It's what in regard to like leadership style, like I would say that same kind of fire and anger, kind of whatever. I think it's okay to use that to like get started. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I always kind of feel like there's three phases, right? I mean, you can break it down however you want and give data or whatever, but really there's like the start, the scale, and the optimize, right?
Right.
And I think like I'm pretty good at starting.
Mhm.
I actually have focused a lot of my efforts on scale because I think that's the thing that people are the worst at, and there's the least amount of help with or materials.
Right.
And then by the time the optimization gets there, like I'm like, somebody get this, do it. It's like when you're turning knobs just to make more money, it's like, yeah, whatever. Like somebody else can do that. I want to go break something and start over, right? And I think that like starting, like I think it's good to have a little bit of that anger, that little bit of like come on, because if you're doing something disruptive, you got to get in front of people. You got to push. You got to make people
Yeah.
listen to you, right? Now, when you hit that scaling phase, and I saw as a leader how I was very much when we started, I was like, I knew every single detail. I
Mm.
was upset. I don't want to be disrespectful, but I bet if you put me through like some sort of therapist or psychologist, they'd be like, "Oh, you are obsessive compulsive, right?" And I enjoy that part. I enjoy obsessing about work. I enjoy, you know, as sick as it sounds, like I still don't really sleep that much. I'm always curious. I do now try to like get into topics that aren't so work related because there's a
Mhm.
benefit to that. But what I found very quickly after we grew, and this is a story that I've talked about a little bit, but here is where I really have my turning point. We were so the first company. It's all been under Bulu, but there's
Mhm.
just been different iterations. So when we started in 2012, we
Okay.
were the 6 subscription box, and it was $10. You get 4 to 5 premium vitamin supplement samples. Try it out. Come back to the site. Buy full size. But our twist was we were using data to manufacture our own products and sell to
Okay.
people.
Love it.
Everything's working. Within a couple of years, we're doing like 10 million in revenue, 60,000 subscribers, like
Mm.
winning awards, like all that good stuff. And I was working at my desk one morning, and my wife, because we, of course, even though we had all the funding and money, we had like the office and everything all in one. We were living in it just because I had to be that close to it, right? She came out on like a Sunday morning, and I was at my desk just like hammering away, and apparently I was like kind of yelling and cursing under my breath. And she like looks at me and she's like, "Are you doing all right?" And I was like, "What? Huh?" And she goes, "You're talking to yourself." I'm like, I don't talk to myself. Like, I'm not crazy, you know? And she
Yeah,
goes,
who are you? What are you talking about? Yeah.
"Yeah, yeah." And she goes, like, wait, have you been here like all night?" And I'm like, "Well," and I went into some rant of something. She's like, "Hey." And my wife is like the most grounded, positive, awesome person ever. I totally tricked her into marrying me. We, she goes, "Let's go for a walk." And basically we went on this walk, and she was like, "Hey, like, what are you saying at your desk?" I'm like, "I'm just kind of like talking to myself or whatever." And she goes, "Oh, but like, what are you saying to yourself?" And I'm like, the concept, it's kind of embarrassing, but at 30, like, that's the amount of self-awareness I had. I was like, "What do you mean? What am I saying to myself?"
Right.
And she goes, "I've noticed when we're in the weight room," she goes, "you turn into a different person." She's
Huh.
like, "You look angry." She goes, "You're angry like the 30 minutes before and about 30
Mm.
minutes after." She
Right.
goes, "You turn into this like kill, hunt, murder, maim attitude." And I'm like, "Well, that's how I was taught, like to play football and do it. Like it was kill. That was all there was to it.
Oh,
When you stepped on the field, you just murder, kill, right?" And I go, "Well, I don't know." Like, and she goes, "Yesterday we were doing some hang cleans and you just like threw it down and whatever." And I go, "Oh," I go, "that?" I go, this is totally not PC for 2024, but it's the truth. I was thinking in my head, like, that's bullshit. You could have got like 2 more, you fucking pussy, like all this negative stuff in my head.
Yeah.
And she goes, oh, wait, do you always think like that when you're in the gym? And I go, oh yeah. And she goes, wait, when we go running, we were doing marathons at the time too. She goes, are you thinking that at the marathon? I'm like, oh, definitely. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
When you're working, are you thinking that? I was like, I never thought about that. Yeah, actually, I kind of am.
Yep.
And that's the part where I go, I think that's like, side note, I think it's okay to do that if you're aware of it, because it will give you a little bit of an edge, but you have to be really careful with it. And she looks at me and I go, wait. I remember I looked at her and go, wait. What's going on in your head? And she's like, oh, good job. You did awesome.
You got this.
And I remember I go, F you. And she goes, what? And I was like, oh, sorry, that just came out.
Yeah.
She goes, wait, what do you mean? I go, F you. Like, you really think that? And she goes, yeah. And I go, you're lying. And she goes, Paul, I think most people think like that, or they just don't. She goes, I think less people are being as hard on themselves as you are.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I was just like shook, right? Mm-hmm. And she stops me and she goes, let me ask you something. She knows who I'm really tight with and, close with in this world. And she goes, would you ever talk to your little sister like that? And I was like, no way. I was like, I love my little sister. I'm like, I wouldn't talk to her. She goes, what about your mom? I go, no, my mom's awesome. I never. She goes, what about me? I'm like, no, I would not make it this far. And she goes, and this literally put me in tears on the ground. And she had never seen me cry. I folded, I had a breakdown in the street in Lincoln, Nebraska. She goes, then why is it that the most important person in the world you're treating like absolute shit?
Yeah.
Why are you talking to yourself like that? And that just changed everything for me. And it really made me realize that as a leader, you can kind of use a little bit of that attack, kill, during the quote unquote game, right? But if you really want to build something long term, you really have to learn and change that attitude of people will leave you if they're around that negativity. And it really opened my eyes up to holy cow, the most successful people that I actually know that are happy, have time, and have money, they have such a different outlook on things, right? And I would say what it taught me to do was to find people that are better than I am, tell them and be honest with them, and honestly, hire them and get the hell out of the way, and how to trust them. And then know that it's not ever going to be perfect. But if we're hitting goals, perfection isn't what is the quote? Good or great is the enemy of perfection, right?
Sure.
Nothing was ever going to be perfect, and perfect is kind of an implosion, right? But it taught me to be a leader in that, what am I actually doing? We're trying to do a few things to start something, then really focus in on finding great people, getting out of the way. And then, doing what we got to do. So yeah, it's totally changed. And now as a leader, I don't have a ton of interaction with her. I have a ton of interaction with our team, but as far as operations in the business, there's a problem if I'm involved in a lot of that stuff. So,
well, I think that's pretty classic visionary stuff, right? You and I seem to be wired kind of similar in that regard, Paul. When the first company I started, when we reached about somewhere between 50 and 60 employees is when I really...
Yes, that's when it hurts.
Yeah, well, this is when I realized that my core leadership skills were very much lacking because I needed to touch everything. I had super high standards. I wanted to move 1,000,000 miles an hour. And what ended up happening is that I would get into a department and I would bring a bunch of energy to scale that department. And then it would break because it wasn't really fully formed. And so the aha for me was kind of similar. It was I need an integrator. I need somebody who can come in and take...
You're an EOS guy.
Yeah, huge EOS guy.
Well, I'm diehard.
Let me say this. We flirted with EOS during my first company. We used it a lot, but we didn't, you should say we abused it, maybe is what we did. But when we exited that company and I realized starting this second company, wow, I got to get Ashley back. She was my integrator in the first company. I got to get her back as quickly as possible. I'm like, hey, I thought I could do this next thing without you. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I don't know what you're doing right now, but I need you to quit. I need you to come work with me again. And
Actually, we
she's
don't
now,
take you. I'll take you.
anyway, it's transformed our business. We actually kind of, I had a moment of humility about 2 years ago where we actually had to hire a coach because I realized I was like half-assing parts of EOS that like I did the things that really came naturally to a visionary, and things that were where I was in the way. I was having a hard time getting out of my own way. And
Yeah.
so I have very few direct reports. It sounds like you also do. I have very few. I lead very
I'm a terrible manager. Terrible manager.
Yeah. But I think that's interesting for those people that might be listening to this who are founders, who are building brands or building companies. Like I think what Paul and I want you to hear is that's okay. Like it's okay to be you. You know what I mean? But you have to have the humility to realize, man, I need Ashley. Paul, you need your wife, and you need these other people that are around you that are better leaders in areas where you're terrible. But being terrible at stuff is actually great, because if you need to be great at everything, your bottleneck being you is going to be a really small company. The size of a company that I could white knuckle every detail of, a few hundred K, I don't know, maybe $500,000, depending on the industry. I can white knuckle some things. I've got some grit. But the 8-figure company, the valuable company, the company that really has an impact on the world and really lives out my core values, then that's going to take a lot of people, and they're going to need better managers than Tyler Jefcoat. So I'm sure that sounds like that's what you found out as well.
It's weird when you get to the point where you go, oh, making money is actually easy. Making money the way that I want to make it with the people that I want to make it. And then wait a second, is it even about making money? It's such a weird thing to change. And, one of the things that's really hit me in the last year is, and it took a lot of like soul searching, right? It's like, hey, building $1 billion company, like that's always kind of been the goal. But like, is it actually worth it? And then just kind of like seeing like, you know what, I'm going to do the things that I'm good at, and I'm going to get people to do the other things. And like, if it happens, it happens. Right. And what's weird is how things start to come your way in the universe. And I was like the last guy to be kind of, I don't know, like hokey and opportunity and positive. I was like, those people are full of shit. And I'm like, it's better over here, and it's all right. You got to tap into it. And it's EOS is just, it's cool that we're talking about this, because these are the conversations that I have with a lot of CEOs behind closed doors. But like, man, like hats off to you. Like not a lot of people are like, I'm like, I suck at management. You're like, oh yeah, that's a good thing. And I'm like, oh shit, you get it. Like you get it. And like for your listeners, if this doesn't make sense to them, they're not there. Like they're not there yet. And like pay attention, because when things aren't working correctly and you're still miserable and rich or whatever, like come back to this podcast and like hear what we're saying. Because one of the major things EOS like really opened my eyes to is, there are people that truly love like being an executive assistant. There are people that truly love repetitive work, right? And that was just something I couldn't wrap my head around, right? And so, EOS is the closest thing to scaling, like a roadmap that I've ever found. And here's a little cool side note for you. I'm probably going to get in trouble for sharing this, but I won't use his name. But I will say a couple of years ago, I got a call from somebody, and they said, we want to call you and bet you to talk to somebody important. I thought it was total BS. Nothing like this had ever happened to me. And I was like, yeah, whatever. This is a sales scam, right? Well, it turns out that this gentleman had worked for a long time directly with Elon Musk.
Nice.
And he was calling me to ask me about very specific industry stuff that he kind of heard through the grapevine that I would know. And I'm more than happy to share that. So I don't charge. I'm just like, it's cool to meet those people and network. And he's talking just like we were. And he starts using these phrases. And I go, hey, man, I know you are like a diehard operations person. I get it. And I just have to ask you, and I might sound like an idiot, but have you ever heard of EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System? And he gets silent. And I'm like, oh God, he thinks I'm an idiot. Because I was new to it, and I thought maybe it almost feels a little scammy when you first read it, right?
Right.
And he goes, look, we run blah, blah, blah system, blah, blah, blah. Like he knew every cheat assist, all the other stuff I haven't had time to learn yet, right? And he goes, when it comes to managing Elon, the only thing that works is bits and pieces of EOS and really truly kind of talking to him about accountability. He said the same thing that as Elon Musk's wife said in an interview that really stuck with me. And it was when you understand how to operate a business and you want to grow into different categories, all it really takes then is learning the industry. And that's, sorry, I got a cold. I sound
That's all right. That's all right.
a little rough here. When people look at SpaceX, Tesla, all of that other stuff, and I think about the operations people kind of behind it, I'm like, man, that's crazy that he's got people that are using elements of EOS and letting him do his visionary thing. And they're executing through accountability. And that is the biggest thing for me. When I learned that EOS was about accountability, not organization, that really hit with me. And frankly, that's why we have like a team of really, really awesome A players here, because we don't mess with each other. Like, I don't know who opens up the warehouse. I don't know where, like, how to get a key fob. Like, I know who to go to, but I have no clue how any of it works. And I wear that as a badge of pride, because one of the first things my EOS coach, when he drilled me, he found out like if any HR paperwork, any keys or any of that stuff, I was sitting on all the passwords and everything. And he's like, he just looks at me and goes, who are some people you admire in the world? And this was a while ago. I was like, I don't know, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, the cliches, which I'm not sure if I do quite as much anymore, maybe in weird ways. And he goes, Paul, do you think they have the master key to their office and warehouse? Do you think they're sitting on the HR documents? I was like, oh, he goes, you need to let go of the vine, man. And I was like, oof. Yeah, I'm never going to be able to operate at that level that I need to if I really don't find people to trust. And actually the whole trust thing, that's my problem. That's not anybody that I'm working with's problem. So yeah, I can't, it's like we should get commission for talking.
I know. Yeah, that's right.
Come
another
on,
Gino Wickman.
Cough it up, Gino.
That's right. Actually, I was on a really small webinar with him recently. Got to talk to him about it a little bit. He's another guy with a great haircut, by the way. I just want to say that. And it's fantastic hair. Great hair. Yeah, he's a neat guy. He's a really neat guy. Authentic dude. Yeah, really.
I love that he's like second generation, right? You don't find that. And probably as a parent, I look at my kids, I'm like, man, these kids got too much. Like, like I'm terrified, that like we're spoiling them or whatever. But, I mean, they come and scrub toilets at the warehouse because that's just part of the deal, right? But like, I have a weird respect for them because a lot of the second generations or scions I know, dude, they shit the bed. Like they ruin everything. And he did the exact opposite. So I have like that's rare. Like you want to pay attention to somebody like that takes something and make it better generationally. That's pretty cool.
Those are they are rare. And it's, it is. It's interesting. It's a combination. There's some DNA there. Like, it's like, the likelihood, and I don't know this, my kids are still young. They're 9 and 11. One of them's very much wired like me. One of them's very much wired like my wife.
Same.
Which means one of them's like really intense and driven, and one of them has a ton of friends, right? It's like
yep.
Everyone likes one of them, right? Like it's that kind of thing. Yep. But like I do think that the odds of us passing on a business to kids that are happy about that is actually still pretty low. Like most of us need to probably exit and need to probably help our kids find their own path. But it is amazing when you have the Gino kinds of stories where that generational kind of character, grit, drive, meet the like talent. Yeah, it's really interesting. Hey, I do want to take a minute because we're gonna run out of time on the podcast here. I want to talk about logistics for just a second here. So, by the way, guys, you may not know this. We don't just love EOS and college football. I'm an e-commerce accountant, and Paul happens to operate in the logistics game for e-commerce brands and other consumer product brands. Give me something current, dude. What are you seeing as being where the logistics game is evolving? Is there something that's on your radar that you feel like people aren't paying attention to? Give me kind of your nugget on what people need to be focused on that they're really letting slip through the cracks right now.
I'm gonna, the reason I reached out and the reason like I'm trying to just like connect with people that know the game, right? And and the people that are listening that have products. First of all, thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah.
Here's the deal. I never want to go out there publicly, socially, and just say hey, buy this thing that I have because it's mine. That annoys the hell out of me, right?
Yep.
And for the last 2 years on social and frankly, keynote events and all of that stuff, I really shut it off. One, because we were negotiating to buy the company, but two, because I really didn't have anything novel or interesting to talk about, right? And frankly, even having sold a software company and had iterations of our company, I tried it and it was probably the grossest thing I've ever done because I would come on to shows like this and I'd be like, oh, we do fulfillment, and it's cool, whatever, we bought the company in October of 2023, which is pretty recent. And frankly, we got it and we were like, okay, well, that was a really great deal. We have this warehouse, we have all this stuff together, and it took so much time and energy that we kind of went oh crap, what are we going to do?
Now what do we do?
Yeah. And everybody was kind of well, we're going to do fulfillment. I'm like, I no. And they're like, what do you mean no? I'm like, I can't just do the phone call where they're like, what are your shipping rates? I get it. Right. Yeah. Yes, we can beat a lot of people's shipping rates, but if the point of entry is you want to do it cheaper with us, right, we don't want to talk to you. And that sounds crazy because we'll get to the cheap part or the cost effective, whatever word I'm supposed to use, right? Low shipping rates. Let's just call it what it is.
Sure.
But we want to talk to people that have a growth mentality. And when it dawned on us that really the common goal and probably where we went a little in the wrong direction with investors was our goals became different. And so I was very much what goal do we share in common with consumer brands? And the answer to that is actually we all want more shipping labels. More shipping labels means more sales for them. It means better volume, better discount. Okay, what does that mean? And man, we were hoofing it. We were, fighting in the red water with all the other fulfillment companies. Ship Bob's dropping hundreds of millions of dollars after they had called us and asked us everything we're doing. And we're the people that bark and everybody else calls and then they try to go do it themselves or whatever, just because we have that rising tide raises all ships mentality. Well, I'm kind of at my wit's end. We're all kind of panicked, right? We're making cuts. We're doing whatever. We're just making sure everything's stable. And I will forever be grateful for Ralph at a company called Paracana. And Ralph calls me up and the conversation went a little bit something I put my life savings into this product, yada, yada, yada. And I was like, hey, man, I was like, here's the deal. First of all, your packaging. And I get a lot of calls where people are like, something's broken with my product. I don't know what it is. And I don't have the answers, but I think I've just seen enough where a lot of times I'm like, oh, do this, this, and this. It probably happened 3 times today. I don't want anything from anybody. I just want to talk to people I want to ship, right? And I go, Ralph, here's the deal. We have a really great partnership with a software company. We sold our WMS off. We have a partnership with a great company. I'm on the product development team. It's called extensive.com. It's extensive, no E on the end. They acquired a couple of companies that we had integrated into our WMS. I flew out to Vegas, pinned the CEO down. He was trying to run away from me. I was like, Andy, you're not getting away from me. I need 5 minutes. Told him what we were up to. It actually worked. We talked longer that night and it all worked out. He still probably thinks I'm a little bit crazy. Sure. I tell this Ralph, I go, look, you're not going to, Apple and Facebook change our policies. We saw tons of people get screwed. We did the subscription box thing. The digital marketing isn't quite working for it. POS in retail isn't built for subscription. I've always had this idea, but I can't find anybody that has the gumption to pick up the phone and pull it off. And he's like, I'll do it. What is it? He's like, nothing's working, whatever. Look, Ralph. And I said, our system and what we have built here and what Disney, GNC, Crail, all these brands that we work with essentially funded us to learn, which we didn't know any better. We can do B2B, D2C, bricks and mortar, e-commerce. We did it all because nobody told us not to, and they were paying the money to do it. And I said, I think that unless you have a really good TikTok strategy, because that is working like crazy now, but that's a flash in the pan, right? Like that's Google AdWords, that's like new Shopify stores. Like it's good to ride the wave, but keep your life jacket on if you're going to do it, right?
Right.
And I said, here is the one thing that I have seen even before we started Bulu Box, when I was at Complete Nutrition, retail, bricks and mortar, we went from 3 to 83 million. I was employee 7. And the one common thing I've seen is if you can get your product into about, I don't know why the number is, but about 60 physical locations. And I'm not even talking selling your product. I'm talking like get an advertisement in the window, get a ad on the checkout, right? Something about that many eyeballs and that many stores really allows you to kind of break even and kind of move into like getting more and more sales. And I said, if we might do this as a brand, but if I can get some people to try it out and it works, I would rather not do my own physical product. And I said, go ahead. And what he had was this, it's a gummy mixture. And instead of having CBD and THC in it, which we will do CBD products, it didn't have anything in it. And he was using it because he would select that stuff, put it in the gummy, and then he'd use it for pain himself, right? And I said, go ahead and make a list of 100 small bricks and mortar retailers, right? Like, yes, do the Shopify, yes, do Amazon, do all of that stuff. But it's really expensive to acquire a customer right now. That'll change. But like right now it's tough. That's what we see. And I said, call them up and say, hey, we're working with Bulu. If you put us on your website right now, we can drop ship and sell to your customers. Oh yeah, I should, everybody should be doing that, right? Even if you have like an exclusive product on your website, just use it as SEO on different websites, like make up a different flavor and just get your name out there.
That's right.
And here's the second thing. When you're on the phone with them, just ask them, hey, are you using Square? Are you using Wix? What are you using at checkout? And this is the part I didn't know. I think it's like 80% of independent, smaller bricks and mortar, they're all using a very standardized Square, Reader, et cetera. I go, make a list of 100 of them, call them up and tell them this. I can drop ship on your website and I'm going to send you a couple of my product. If you like my product, go ahead, call me back or use this link and you can order back from me 2 blueberry and 1 lemonade. You don't have to buy a case. You don't have to buy a pallet. You just buy what you want when you want. And here at Bulu, we will do the individual item pick and pack for bricks and mortar retail. It can be one corner store. It could be 400 smaller stores or whatever. And boy, I didn't hear from Ralph. And I was like, oof, that's a terrible idea, right? Like, I thought it was, whatever. I asked the account manager, I go, what how's Paracana doing? Like, whatever. And she stops. Tanya looks at me and she goes, oh, you don't know? I go, no. Did they go under? Like, what happened? She goes, oh, no. She goes, here. And she types in Paracana in Google and hits enter. And your viewers can do this too. Page after page, it's like Winship Trading, Don's Head Shop, like all these random retailers.
Wow.
He was in like the first 3 pages of all different locations. I call him up and he's like, oh yeah. He's like, dude, it worked. I was like, why didn't you tell me? I haven't had time, right? And so now, and then we took that to a few other places. And my favorite is a company called Buy Optimizers, who they were working with KE, Palco, a lot of distributors and stuff. But Tammy, who she's public with all this information on her LinkedIn, it's probably our best sales tool. Every week she's posting like, got into Apple supplement store, like Wisconsin, Fond du Lac, wherever it is. Every other day, there's like a new small shop that they're getting in and they're using the same strategy. And she's flat out giving us credit for it. And now we have all these brands coming into us and it's awesome. And I think that strategy of whether it's with us or somebody else, but getting into the smaller bricks and mortar retail. And the trick is don't try to sell them a case. Don't try to sell them a pallet. just get them some of the product and let them come back and order it from you. That's been going off like crazy. We just had a kid right out of college. He made some sort of cool little lure and he sold a bunch on TikTok, and talked to him about it. And he kept sprinting back to me, and he's like, it's like, so he was already in a few retailers, and he's like, oh, so you can do this for the retailer. So I think that's a really cool thing that it's probably got about 2 years until everybody figures it out. Yep. But yeah, your viewers are kind of the first people outside of a sales call that are learning about that strategy. I don't know if that makes sense, because we're still.
No, it actually does. What's interesting, I think what you talked about is genius. And we have one of our most successful clients this year. They sell some products that are a little closer to like the Second Amendment, so they can't sell it on Amazon. But they have just crushed it doing what I call the ground game, which you just described there as the ground game.
Yes.
Like no one's doing the ground game anymore because it's all meta ads and TikTok and Amazon PPC. But guess what? There's opportunity if you have the logistical sophistication to deliver product. Yep. And I think what you just described, Paul, is now you can do the ground game yourself, and you can have your warehouse, and you can bring put your buddy Mike in a truck with a few units in his trunk or whatever. You can do that, or it might be helpful to partner with a logistical partner like yourself, like Bulu Group.
And like a lot of times, I mean, when we actually, by the time it's said and done, it's typically either a wash or people are saving money by doing it through us. Like, why? Because we have the volume and we already have the discounts. And we literally, I just tell people, I go, look, there's no entry, there's none of that stuff. It's just store, pack, ship. We mark it up 10%. Like that's that, and what's crazy is how simple it is, but it's just not being done on scale. And so I think that if I had a consumer goods brand, we're thinking about doing one just to use it as a case study and blog about it. But I really would be fighting like hell to get on about 60 shelves. And I don't even actually care if I'm selling. I just want the eyeballs there, and I'll take them coming back to the website or Amazon buying, because that's what I view it as, is like, it's shelf space to advertise your brand.
And you can get better margins, because I think we're getting crushed by Amazon fees right now. So hey, listen, we need to land the plane here. You and I are both late for our hair appointments here this evening. It happens, right? But hey, so seriously, I'm going to make sure all of your links, Paul, are on the show notes. We're going to post this to YouTube, and then we'll also post it to the podcast players. And guys, I just want to say this, like the way that Paul and his team are doing this is the right way. I would highly recommend taking a closer look at Bulu Group. And yeah, man, next time I'm in Lincoln, we'll have to swing by the shop there and take a look at what you guys have going on.
Anytime, just knock on the door, man.
That's awesome, dude. Well, hey, thank you for joining ROP. I do want to ask you final question. I sneak this in every single episode, but just listen, man, you're a high test dude. And the reason that you're able to juggle all the things that you juggle is because you have, picked up some habits, some hacks, some rhythms that are maybe giving you ROI. Like, do you have any thoughts on what you would recommend people exploring in terms of habits or hacks or process?
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll keep it short here. So, there's I hate the rhetoric, like, oh, stay positive, like as much as I believe it, I always try to leave people with, like, give them something concrete that they can actually try. Right. And I don't know if this is mind blowing or anything like that, but I started this, I just kind of put it together. It's probably a combination of EOS and 7 habits and a bunch of different things. But here's what I know. If I don't do this, my life gets out of control. If I just take an hour, 2 hours every couple of days and do it, but it's so simple. I pull up my Google Calendar, right? And I have 4 categories. Technically, I guess I have 5 maybe, but we'll just say 4. And I even forget what book. I think it's 7 Habits. The urgent and important, not urgent, urgent, not important, not urgent, not important.
Right.
I have 4 categories, and red is urgent and important. And I create within Google Calendar, I think the color is tomato, right? And then I have important and not urgent, which is actually where you want to be living your life, right?
That's right.
And I think the color for that is banana in Google. And that's just me proving, like, I actually do this, right? And then urgent but not important is probably where most people spend their time, but because it feels good to check the box, right? But it doesn't really matter.
That's
And
right.
then a lot of people just bog down by not urgent, not important. So I spend, and when I have an executive assistant that helps out with this, and I spend at least an hour every 2 or 3 days, and I sit down, and my calendar has to be at a minimum 2 weeks out. And the way I view it is you have 40 units of time, right? I mean, entrepreneurs have more, but you strive for that 40-hour work week. And I block off whatever project, whatever task I'm doing. I don't just put the deadline on it, right? I color code it and I make those blocks of time and I plan out, like if I have a presentation due, right? Red is on the Friday 2 weeks away, right?
Mhm.
And then I carve out whatever time I think it's going to take, I double it. However much I think it's going to cost, I triple it. That's just like the rule of thumb, because I think people can really guess what something would cost or the time it would take in a perfect world. But the reality is you just can't adjust all the variables, right? And I'll tell you what, when that calendar is planned out 2 weeks at a time, there's 40 little blocks that are color coded. It becomes very easy to see what is important and what is not important. And I can look at my calendar going back, and the goal is to get 60 days out, right? 6 months, I have been a couple of times. But when you start to look, and I can just scroll through, and my months start to look red,
Mm.
I'm doing something wrong. If
Mm.
everything looks yellow, I'm like, okay, I'm in the flow of things. And I think just being conscious at least 2 weeks of color coding the importance of what you have to do,
Huge.
it really is shocking how much stuff we do that doesn't lead to changing the metrics.
That's right.
And so I really would encourage people to break up your week, color code it of importance, and be ruthlessly editing anything that isn't yellow. Try to get rid of it.
And like gamify it. This is something I exactly do what you do there. And me and my assistant, it's kind of a quarterly game to kind of be like, okay, can we, because Google now is crazy. Google, like if you color code it with the little tags, it'll tell you what percentage of your time,
Yeah.
you know, and the one that's called like admin or whatever you would deem to be that stuff that doesn't move the needle,
Yeah.
or it doesn't give you energy in life as a
Yeah.
leader. The gamify said, okay, that was 17.5% of my time last month.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can get it down to 15%. Let's see if we can edit that out. And that gives you the benefit of, first of all, if you're competitive like me and Paul here, you get to win, but
Yeah.
also you're redeploy that energy towards those things that make you more money and make more impact in the world. And
And the sorry to cut you off, but like the other like really important part that I left out is like I put my life stuff in there, and I have my family, and honestly, like the entire company sees my calendar. We all see each other's calendar, and sometimes I'll have something on there that's red, and somebody will go in there and change it blue, right? And they will see that parent teacher conferences start at 4:45 p.m. That is red. It is urgent and important. So don't you dare put anything over that. And what's interesting is, as frustrating it is for people sometimes to see, they really become to respect and understand, like, oh, we really are about prioritizing things. So I think that layer of like sharing the calendar with the people you're working with, I just share it with everybody in my company. I don't care if they say I'm going to a dentist appointment or a
right.
colonoscopy, like whatever. That's right.
Yeah.
But putting your family stuff on there as well, it really helps you see what is important and what isn't.
Amen, dude. Completely agree. The only way to build a culture in a company, in my opinion. Paul Jarrett, awesome conversation, dude. Thank you so much for joining RP, man. So, hey, listen, guys, we're going to close this episode. You have been here for 54 minutes or so if you're watching this. And what I want you to know is Paul and I just respect and appreciate your time. So we hope that you grab something out of this that really moves the needle for you. We're going to make sure that Paul's links are super easy to find in the show notes and in the YouTube channel. Paul, can't wait to meet you at a show here sometime soon, buddy. Thanks again for joining the show. And then for everyone listening to this, hey, listen, until I catch you next week, go kill it. Let's have a great week. Cheers.